Emma. This is
Yes.
your legacy video.
Okay.
Today is June 10th, 2017, around 5:30 in the evening.
Okay.
Okay, first question. How old are you?
I am 88. I'll be 89 on Monday, June 12th.
And when and where were you born?
Cleveland, Ohio.
In what year were you born?
What year? 1928.
What is your first, most vivid memory?
Probably because I had to have my tonsils out when I was 5 years old. I remember them chasing me around the bed in the hospital to catch me.
Tell me about your dad. What did he do for work?
My dad owned restaurants, hamburger shops. At one time, he had 5.
What else about him?
He was a great guy. He had a wonderful sense of taste, which was kind of good because he had no sense of smell. But he was very friendly, very outgoing, very generous with his time, had a lot of friends, and we had a very happy family life.
What about your mom?
My mom was quiet, on the quiet side, but she was the kind of person that everybody loved. Unfortunately, she had a heart condition, and she passed away when she was 34 years old, which was very, very sad.
How old were you?
I was 12 years old when she passed away.
Okay, tell me about your sister.
My sister, okay. My sister is Elaine Mandel. Mandel is her married name. My dad decided, he was very lonely, decided to remarry after about 4 or 5 years, and his brother introduced him to this woman. They fell in love. They did get married, and she had a daughter. Her name is Elaine, and in a way I kind of helped raise Elaine because my stepmom also helped my dad in the restaurant business. So many times I was in charge of my half-sister, and I would take care of her.
What other kinds of responsibilities besides that did you have as a kid?
Well, I had to work in the restaurant. I started at the age of about 14. My first job was washing dishes because that was before dishwashers. Then I used to help out in the restaurant as a waitress. And at one point, when I was a teenager, I was also a car hop in the restaurant business. So I grew up in the business, which was fine with me.
Where did your family used to go on vacation?
We would go to New York every winter because it wasn't that far from Cleveland, Ohio. We would go in the winter time, and we'd go to the shows. At one point, we were there New Year's Eve when the bell dropped. The ball dropped. That's right, for New Year's Eve. It was very exciting. But then, as my dad got older, he suffered from hay fever. So in August, we would go up to New Hampshire because he wasn't bothered by his hay fever then. So we would all drive up there. They would stay for an entire month. I was already in college, so I would come back earlier by myself. I'd fly back so I could go back to school.
Do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Not really. I never thought about teaching. I ended up majoring. I had a wonderful psychology professor, and I decided to major in psychology, not even sure what I was going to do. But as it turned out, as fate turned out, I ended up getting a job with a vocational guidance agency as a psychometrist. I used to interview high school children. They work up a battery of tests and then interview them afterward. The children and their parents recommended professions where I thought they would do well, schools where they might do very well, and I really enjoyed that profession.
Do you remember what big world events happened while you were growing up?
Well, the biggest world event was Second World War II, which was very devastating. And then I also remember the president that we had at the time also passed away, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He passed away at that time also.
What would you say is different today than from when you grew up?
It's very different. As children, we didn't worry about locking our doors. We weren't concerned about someone molesting us, robbing us. Even for Halloween, we'd go out door to door, never concerned that someone was going to give us something that was unhealthy. Um, it was a lot more peaceful, easygoing. Of course, there was nothing like email or internet, things like that, and the world news wasn't as devastating as it is now. We didn't deal with criminals the way we do now.
Where did you go to college?
I wanted to go to college out of town, so I went for 1 year to Ohio University, which is on the border of Ohio and West Virginia, which my father wanted to be. When I was growing up, they didn't think that it was necessary for girls to have a college education. So when I came back after that year, I wanted to continue. So I got a part-time job with the Cleveland Public Library System, and I went to Case Western Reserve University, and that's where I graduated from.
And I know you kind of already mentioned this, but how did you decide what you wanted to do with your life?
It was my background in psychology that that influenced me more than anything else.
How did you get engaged, and how old were you?
How old was I? I have to stop and think. Turn it off for a minute.
No, it's fine.
Okay. Well, I got engaged to Jerry Goldman in his car one night. We were coming home from a date, and he pulled out a ring and asked me to marry him. And I was probably, when I graduated from college, I was 23, probably 26.
But you were engaged before that?
Yes, I was engaged once before, and then we even had a bridal shower, and then I realized that it was a mistake. I was not in love with the guy, and I ended up having to return all the gifts from the bridal shower.
How old were you when you got engaged to him?
I was probably 23 at the time.
Were you still in college?
I had finished. I had just finished.
What's your favorite story about your mom?
About my mom?
Oh wait, I read that wrong. Well, you can answer that too. What's your favorite story about my mom?
Oh, about your mom. Well, which one should, what I remember about my mom, I was in elementary school, and I used to come home we used to come home for lunch. And I remember one time I came home for lunch, and after I ate my lunch, my mom gave me a little green beret for my hair. And I was so thrilled. That just shows you the difference between those days and now. That a little small beret could thrill me so much. And what I remember about your mom, I have to think about that one. Well, what I remember a great deal about was your mom always looked up to her brother, who was older than she was, and she always felt that Ron was very smart. She looked up to him, but she was always a very quiet, considerate girl, um, always ready to help out. In fact, we had a deal that I wanted. I was very anxious for my children to do well in school, and so we had a deal where Judy, she would read to me every night. I would do the dishes. She didn't have to help with the dishes, but while I was doing that, she would read to me, and that was great. I look forward to that every night.
What was your most memorable family vacation?
We went to Storybook Forest in southern Ohio, and then we went to a farm, and actually a working farm, and we had to get up early in the morning at the crack of dawn, go feed the chickens, and that was the first time I ever sat on a horse. It was pretty exciting because we were there, Jerry and I were there with our kids. Uh, and then the next best vacation, we went to um, not New Hampshire. Well, anyway, we're getting off the subject, so we'll get back to that.
Um, what makes you proud of your children and grandchildren?
I'm very proud of my children and my grandchildren. They are studious, they are kind, they are thoughtful, and I feel very, very blessed because not all grandchildren are willing to do things with their grandparents, and I feel so fortunate. Uh, they're all very loving, kind, thoughtful, and I could never ask for any children or grandchildren to be any different. They are a number one.
What is the best thing about being a parent?
Seeing your children grow up and have families of their own, being successful, being happy, being loving parents.
What is the best thing about being a grandparent?
Having see your grandchildren grow up and be so accepting of you, be so thoughtful and kind, willing to get together and do things together, think about you. You can't ask for anything better than that.
Okay. What have your nicknames been over the years?
Well, my first, it wasn't a nickname, my Yiddish name, my Jewish name is Gittel, and my parents always called me that. My parents, my aunts, my uncles. Uh, and then the other uh, nickname I had was Gertie, Gertie, which I'm not very fond of, but anyway, that's what it was.
What about Rachel's nickname for you?
Rachel. Oh.
Rachel and Karen?
Yeah, what was it? I can't remember it. Gertie Gumbum. Yes, my nieces called me Gertie Gumbum. I forgot about that.
What is your favorite color?
Blue.
Any specific shade of blue?
Sort of a sky blue.
What is your favorite food?
Muffins.
Really? How are your children like you?
Well, they're studious, fun-loving, thoughtful, and they're very good parents.
What are your 3 best qualities?
That's the one I wrote down, but I can't think. Well, I like to work with children, with adults. I try to be as helpful as possible. That's number one. love to read. I don't know if that's a good quality or not. And I'm sensitive to what goes on in the world. I wish it was a better place for so many people. And I I do love my family and my children and my grandchildren.
What are your three worst qualities?
That's a tough. I mean, it's not shouldn't be tough, but okay. Um, I tend to be compulsive about my house, where things are, about cleanliness. Compulsive about cleanliness, and I've always had a problem with food and diet and things like that. That's probably one of my worst qualities, also.
Do you have any special sayings?
Well, God bless you is about the only special saying I can think of.
No, like quotes that you live by or anything?
Oh, no, not really.
Is there anyone you truly admire or would call a hero?
Like a hero? I thought about that, and I really couldn't think of anybody that I thought of as a hero. Um, well, I think my father was a great guy. I thought he was exceptional. And actually, the family that my father married into after my mother died, her parents, her father and her mother, were exceptional people. For one thing, they accepted me and treated me just like their other grandchildren, which I was very fortunate. So they were great people.
If you could have three wishes, what would they be?
Number one, my children and my grandchildren should live a very happy, healthy lives, successful lives. Uh, should be peace on earth, willing, hopefully, um, and that my family should enjoy life as much as possible.
What's the best compliment you've ever received?
Well, I was one of the Jefferson Award winners. I think that was a pretty good compliment.
And what is that?
It's chosen. I was chosen to win this award that is KSBW television station. Every year they have Jefferson Awards, and people are selected for various reasons. At that time, the head of the foster grandparent program felt that I qualified for the Jefferson Award because I was not only working in school as a foster grandparent, but at Dominican Hospital, I was taught to do their legal custody billing. So I had a pretty full-time job, and I was chosen from Santa Cruz County as a Jefferson Award winner.
If you could go back to any age, what would it be?
That's a tough one. Probably maybe when my children were growing up and seeing them grow as adults. That would, and then also, no, I take that back. I would go back to when as each one of my grandchildren were born, and seeing them as much as I could, helping to be with them, raise them, having spent time with me. That's what I would go back to when they were little and seeing them grow up, and now, and I enjoy seeing them as adults.
What is the most difficult thing that has ever happened to you?
Probably when my mother passed away.
Were you there?
Yes. You want to know the circumstances? I don't know. We were going to a movie, and she collapsed in the lobby. And so they had to call the paramedics, and everybody rushed to the hospital. And she never recovered. And she was a nice lady.
What, if anything, would you do differently in your life?
I noticed that, but I can't say. Make a better marriage, I guess, would be the only thing I could think of.
Yeah. What do you know now that you wished you had known when you were younger?
That life does go on regardless of mistakes, circumstances. You just have to live above all of that and just keep going.
And last question, what would you like your children and grandchildren to remember most about you?
That I love them very, very much.
Anything else you want to say?
Okay. That hopefully I'm fun to be with.